The gold band caught the late afternoon sunlight as it lay in the woman's trembling palm, and Zachary Brennan knew instantly that parting with it was breaking her heart into pieces too small to ever mend. Watsonville, California, had seen better days in this scorching summer of 1878, but nothing prepared him for the sight of the young widow standing outside the general store. Her dress faded from too many washings, her eyes hollow with grief and hunger. She couldn't have been more than 22 or 23 years old, with dark hair pulled back in a simple bun and skin that had seen too much sun without proper protection. Her hands shook as she held the ring up to the merchant who had stepped outside for his afternoon smoke. "Please," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know it is not much, but it is real gold. My husband, he saved for 6 months to buy it for me. I just need enough for some flour and beans. My daughter, she has not eaten since yesterday morning." The merchant, a portly man named Henderson, squinted at the ring with practiced disinterest. "I will give you $2 for it." $2, the woman's voice cracked. "But it is worth at least 20. Please, sir, I am not asking for charity, just a fair price." Henderson shrugged. $2 or nothing. I have a drawer full of wedding rings from desperate folks. Yours is not special." Zachary had been leaning against the hitching post, waiting for his own supplies to be loaded onto his wagon. But something about the woman's quiet desperation moved him in a way he had not felt in years. He had seen plenty of hard luck cases during his 30 years on this earth, but there was something different about her. Maybe it was the way she held herself with dignity despite her circumstances, or the way she looked at that ring as if it contained the last piece of her heart. He pushed off from the post and walked over, his boots crunching on the dusty ground. "I will buy it," he said, "for $50. Both the woman and Henderson turned to stare at him. The woman's eyes, he noticed, were the color of dark honey flecked with green. $50. Henderson laughed. "You have lost your mind, Brennan." Zachary ignored him and looked directly at the woman. "That is a fair price for such a ring, is it not?" She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. "Sir, that is far too generous. I could not possibly accept such an amount." "It would not be right. The ring is gold and it clearly means something. $50 is fair." He pulled out his wallet and counted out the bills. More money than he had planned to spend today, but his cattle sale last week had gone well. He could afford it. The woman stared at the money as if it were a mirage that might disappear if she blinked. Tears welled in her eyes. "I do not know what to say." "Say you will take it and feed your daughter." He held out the money. With shaking hands, she reached for the bills, then held out the ring to him. When he took it, their fingers brushed briefly, and he felt something pass between them, some wordless understanding of loss and loneliness that they both carried. Henderson snorted and went back inside his store, clearly annoyed at missing out on the transaction. The woman clutched the money to her chest, tears now streaming down her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much. God bless you, sir. You have saved us today." Zachary turned the ring over in his fingers, feeling the weight of it, the history it carried. Then he did something that surprised even himself. He reached for her hand and pressed the ring back into her palm, closing her fingers around it. "Keep it," he said quietly. "Keep your husband's memory. Use the money for food, but keep the ring." She stared at him as if he had grown a second head. "But you just paid $50 for it. Consider it a loan then, if it makes you feel better. But that ring belongs on your finger, not in a stranger's pocket." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks, and for a moment he thought she might collapse right there in the street. "I cannot accept this." "You do not even know me. Why would you do such a thing?" "Because everyone deserves a little kindness, especially when times are hard." He tipped his hat to her. "Take care of yourself and your daughter, Mrs., she corrected automatically. "Mrs. Lillian Bailey." My husband was Thomas Bailey. He died 4 months ago in a mining accident up in the hills. I am sorry for your loss, Mrs. Bailey. He meant it sincerely. He had lost people too, though not a spouse. Still, loss was loss, and it hollowed you out just the same. You are Mr. Brennan?" She asked, remembering what Henderson had called him. "Zachary Brennan. I have a ranch about 5 miles outside of town. Cattle mostly, some horses." She looked at the money in one hand and the ring in the other, seeming overwhelmed by the sudden reversal of fortune. "I will pay you back. I do not know how or when, but I will. I give you my word." "There is no debt," he said firmly. "Use that money to get back on your feet. That is payment enough." Before she could protest further, he turned and walked back to where his wagon was being loaded. But even as he climbed onto the seat and took up the reins, he found himself glancing back at her. She still stood there, staring after him with an expression he could not quite read. The ride back to his ranch gave him plenty of time to think about what he had just done. $50 was not an insignificant sum, even for him. He had been planning to use that money to repair the barn roof before winter came. But somehow, when he had seen that woman standing there, so proud and so broken at the same time, he had not been able to help himself. His ranch, the Double Bar, was not the biggest spread in the area, but it was his, paid for with years of hard work and careful saving. He had built the house himself, a modest 2-bedroom structure with a wide porch that faced the mountains. It was more space than one man needed, but he had built it with the hope that someday he might have a family to fill it. That hope had faded as the years passed, and he found himself still alone. That evening, as he sat on his porch watching the sun set behind the hills, he found his thoughts drifting back to Lillian Bailey. He wondered where she lived, whether she had managed to buy enough food for herself and her daughter, whether she had put the ring back on her finger. He wondered what her husband had been like. What kind of man would leave his young wife and child to work in the dangerous mines? Then he felt guilty for the thought, because the man was dead and deserved respect. Sleep did not come easily that night. He kept seeing those honey-colored eyes, the way her hands had trembled, the quiet desperation in her voice. He told himself it was just sympathy, nothing more. He had done a good deed, and now he needed to forget about it and move on with his life, but forgetting proved harder than he expected. 3 days later, he had reason to go back into Watsonville for more supplies and to visit the blacksmith about a broken plow blade. As he walked down the main street, he found himself looking for her, though he told himself he was doing no such thing. He did not see her at the general store or outside the hotel or anywhere else he looked. It was the blacksmith, a gruff man named Johnson, who mentioned her. "Heard you did a good turn for the Bailey widow," he said as he examined Zachary's broken plow blade. "That was decent of you. Woman has had a rough time of it since Tom died. You knew her husband?" "Sure did. Tom Bailey was a good man, hard worker. Came out here from Missouri about 3 years back with his new bride and baby girl. Thought he would make his fortune in the mines." Johnson shook his head. "Mining is a fool's game, but he needed quick money, and ranching takes time to build up. Accident that killed him was not even his fault. Cave-in took out 6 men that day." Zachary felt a pang of sympathy. "What about Mrs. Bailey? Does she have family here?" "Not a soul. Her folks back in Missouri are dead, and Tom's family disowned him when he married her, said she was not good enough for their precious son." Johnson spat into the fire. "Rich folks with their noses in the air. Tom did not care. He loved that girl something fierce. Where does she live?" "Got a little cabin on the edge of town, near the creek. Not much more than a shack, really. Been trying to take in sewing and washing to make ends meet, but there is not much call for it. Most folks around here barely have 2 coins to rub together themselves." Zachary nodded slowly, taking in this information. He told himself it was just curiosity, but deep down, he knew it was more than that. There was something about Lillian Bailey that had gotten under his skin, and he could not seem to shake her loose. When he left the blacksmith shop, he found his feet carrying him toward the edge of town, following the directions Johnson had given him. The cabin, when he found it, was even worse than he had imagined. The roof sagged in the middle, the windows were covered with oiled paper instead of glass, and the whole structure looked like a strong wind might blow it over. A small vegetable garden struggled in the dusty soil out front, and a thin line of smoke rose from the chimney. He hesitated, wondering if he should knock or just leave. What would he even say? He had no reason to be here, no excuse for showing up at her door. But before he could decide, the door opened, and a little girl of about 3 or 4 years old came running out, chasing after a scraggly chicken that had escaped from somewhere. She had dark curly hair and her mother's eyes, and she was laughing as she ran. Then Lillian appeared in the doorway, and their eyes met across the dusty yard. She froze, one hand clutching the doorframe, her expression shifting from surprise to something he could not quite identify. "Mr. Brennan," she said, her voice carrying across the space between them. "I did not expect to see you here." The little girl had caught the chicken and now stood holding it, looking at him with open curiosity. "Mama, who is that man?" "A friend, Emma," Lillian said, though she sounded uncertain. "Go put the chicken back in the pen, please." Emma scampered off, and Lillian walked slowly toward him. She was wearing the same faded dress, but her hair was loose around her shoulders, and he thought she looked very young and very tired. He noticed the ring was back on her finger. "I was just passing by," he said, which was a lie but a polite one. "Wanted to make sure you and your daughter were doing all right." "Thanks to you, we are doing much better," she said. "I was able to buy food and even pay the rent on this place for another month." "You saved our lives, Mr. Brennan. I do not think you understand what your kindness meant to us. I am glad I could help." He shifted his weight, suddenly feeling awkward. "Your daughter is beautiful. She looks like you." A soft smile touched Lillian's lips, transforming her face. "She is my whole world. Everything I do for her. That is as it should be." He cleared his throat. "Mrs. Bailey, I hope you will not think me forward, but I wanted to make you an offer." Her smile faded, replaced by wariness. "What kind of offer?" "I need help at my ranch," he said, the idea forming even as he spoke. "Cooking, cleaning, mending. The place has gone to ruin since my housekeeper left last year to live with her daughter in San Francisco. I am willing to pay fair wages, and there is a small cottage on the property that no one is using. It has 2 bedrooms, a real stove, glass windows. You and Emma could live there." She stared at him for a long moment, and he could see her mind working, weighing the offer, looking for the catch. "Why would you do this? You have already done so much." "Because I genuinely need the help," he said honestly. "And because that little cabin is just sitting there empty while you and your daughter are living in a place that looks like it might collapse in the next storm. It makes practical sense." "People will talk," she said quietly. "A widow living on a bachelor's ranch. Let them talk. Anyone who knows me knows I am not that kind of man, and you would have your own separate house. Everything would be proper and respectable." She looked back at the sagging cabin, then at Emma, who was now trying to catch butterflies in the dusty yard. He could see the war playing out on her face, pride versus practicality, hope versus fear. "I would work hard," she said finally. "I would earn every penny you paid me. I would not be a charity case. I know you would. You strike me as someone who does not know how to do anything halfway." She took a deep breath, and when she looked at him again, there were tears in her eyes. "When would you want us to start?" Relief flooded through him, though he was not entirely sure why. "As soon as you are ready. I can bring my wagon around tomorrow if you like, help you move your things. We do not have many things, she said with a sad laugh. But yes, tomorrow would be fine. Thank you, Mr. Brennan. Thank you for giving us a chance. Call me Zachary, he said. If we are going to be working together, we might as well use first names. Only if you call me Lillian. She held out her hand and he shook it, her small hand disappearing into his larger one. I will not let you down, Zachary. I know you will not. As he rode back to his ranch that evening, he told himself he had just made a good business decision. He did need help around the place, and she needed work. It was a practical arrangement that benefited both of them. But somewhere deep inside, in a place he was not ready to examine too closely, he knew it was more than that. He wanted her nearby. He wanted to see her smile more often. He wanted to watch little Emma chase butterflies and hear her laughter ring out across his land. He realized with some surprise, to not be alone anymore. The next morning, he hitched up his wagon and drove into Watsonville with the first light of dawn. Lillian was already awake, her meager possessions packed into 2 battered trunks and a few wooden crates. Emma sat on one of the trunks, clutching a rag doll that had seen better days. "This is everything?" he asked, trying not to sound surprised at how little they owned. "We left Missouri in a hurry," Lillian explained as he loaded the trunks onto the wagon. "And we lost more when Tom died. The mining company took back the cabin he was renting, and they gave us only a few hours to gather our things. I had to leave behind my mother's china and Tom's books, but we have what matters most." Emma piped up. "Mama says as long as we have each other, we are rich." Zachary smiled at the little girl. "Your mama is a very wise woman." The ride to the ranch took about an hour, and Emma spent most of it asking questions. How many cows did he have? Did he have any horses? Were there chickens? Could she have a kitten? Lillian kept trying to shush her, embarrassed by her daughter's chatter, but Zachary found he did not mind. It was nice to have voices other than his own filling the air. When they arrived at the ranch, Lillian fell silent, staring at the main house and the surrounding buildings. "This is your ranch?" she asked, her voice filled with wonder. "It is not much," he said, suddenly seeing it through her eyes and finding it wanting. "But it is mine, free and clear." "Not much," she laughed, a real laugh this time. "Zachary, this is a palace compared to where we have been living. Look, Emma, there is a real barn and everything." The cottage he had mentioned was set about 100 yards from the main house, a small but sturdy structure with a covered porch and a stone chimney. He had built it years ago thinking he might hire a foreman someday, but that had never happened. Inside, there was a main room with a fireplace and cookstove, 2 small bedrooms, and even a real floor made of wooden planks instead of packed dirt. Lillian walked through the space slowly, touching the walls, the furniture, the glass windows. "This is beautiful," she whispered. "Emma, look, you will have your own room." "Really?" Emma's eyes went wide. "I never had my own room before." They spent the rest of the morning getting settled, and Zachary found himself helping more than he had planned, carrying in their belongings, lighting the stove, even fixing a loose board on the porch. When everything was unpacked, Lillian insisted on cooking lunch for all of them as a thank you. As they sat around the small table in the cottage, eating the simple meal of beans and cornbread she had prepared, Zachary felt something loosen in his chest, some tight knot he had not even known was there. This felt right in a way nothing had felt right in a very long time. Over the following weeks, they fell into a comfortable routine. Lillian proved to be an excellent cook and a tireless worker. She cleaned the main house from top to bottom, mended all his clothes, tended a garden, and still found time to help him with the ranch chores when needed. Emma was always nearby, playing with the barn cats or helping feed the chickens or just talking to anyone who would listen. Zachary found himself looking forward to mealtimes, when Lillian would bring food from the main house and they would eat together, talking about their days. She told him about her childhood in Missouri, about meeting Tom at a church social, about their dreams of building a life together in California. He told her about growing up on his father's ranch in Texas, about coming to California after his parents died to start fresh, about the loneliness of building something with no one to share it with. "You never married?" she asked one evening as they sat on the main house porch, watching Emma chase fireflies in the yard. "Came close once," he admitted. "Girl I knew back in Texas, but she wanted city life and I wanted land. We could not find a middle ground, so we parted ways. That was almost 10 years ago now." "Do you regret it?" He thought about it. "Sometimes. But mostly, I think we both made the right choice. She would have been miserable here and I would have been miserable in some city. Better to be alone than with the wrong person." Lillian was quiet for a moment. "Tom and I, we were happy. Not rich, not comfortable, but happy. He used to say that as long as we had love, we had everything. I thought he was being romantic and foolish." Her voice caught. "But now that he is gone, I understand what he meant. I would give anything, anything to have him back, even if it meant being poor for the rest of my life. He was a lucky man to be loved like that. I was the lucky one." She wiped at her eyes. "But life goes on, does it not? For Emma's sake, I have to keep moving forward. Some days, that is harder than others." Without thinking, he reached over and squeezed her hand. She did not pull away, just sat there with her small hand in his, and they watched Emma play until the stars came out. Summer turned to fall, and the days grew shorter and cooler. Zachary found himself making excuses to spend more time around the cottage, fixing things that did not really need fixing, helping with chores that Lillian could have easily managed on her own. He told himself he was just being a good employer, but the truth was harder to ignore. He was falling in love with her. It was not a sudden realization, but a gradual awareness, like watching the sun rise. He loved the way she hummed while she worked, the way she was endlessly patient with Emma, the way she had started to smile more often. He loved her quiet strength, her dignity, the way she faced each day with determination despite her grief. He loved the sound of her laughter, rare but genuine when it came. But he kept these feelings to himself because she was a widow still mourning her husband, and he would not take advantage of her vulnerable situation. He had given her a job and a home, nothing more. If anything else was to develop between them, it would have to come from her in her own time. Then came the day in late October when everything changed. He had been out checking fence lines on the far edge of his property and did not return until after dark. As he rode into the yard, he saw lamps burning in both the cottage and the main house, and Lillian standing on the porch of the cottage, holding Emma, who appeared to be crying. He dismounted quickly and hurried over. "What is wrong? Is Emma hurt?" "Fever," Lillian said, her voice tight with worry. She woke up from her nap burning hot. "I have been sponging her with cool water, but it is not coming down. I do not know what to do." He reached out and touched Emma's forehead, feeling the heat radiating from her small body. "How long has she been like this?" "A few hours. She was fine this morning, and then suddenly this afternoon she just collapsed." "Zachary, I am scared. I lost Tom. I cannot lose her too." "You are not going to lose her," he said firmly, "but we need to get her to the doctor in town." "The doctor charges $2 just for a visit," Lillian said, her voice breaking. "I do not have that kind of money saved yet." "I do," he said. "Get some blankets, I will hitch up the wagon." They made the trip to Watsonville in record time, the wagon bouncing over the rough road in the darkness. Lillian held Emma wrapped in blankets, singing softly to her, while Zachary drove the horses faster than was probably safe. But fear drove him forward because, somewhere along the way, Emma had become important to him too. This little girl with her endless questions and her infectious laughter. The doctor, an older man named Preston, lived above his office in the center of town. He came down in his nightshirt and examined Emma with practiced efficiency while Lillian watched, wringing her hands, and Zachary stood by the door feeling helpless. "Influenza," Dr. Preston said finally. "Bad case of it too, but she is young and seems otherwise healthy. With proper care, she should recover." "What kind of care?" Lillian asked. "Keep the fever down with cool baths. Make her drink as much water as she can manage. Keep her quiet and rested, and watch her breathing. If it becomes labored or she starts coughing up blood, bring her back immediately." He gave them some willow bark tea for the fever and sent them home with instructions to return in 3 days if Emma was not improving. Zachary paid the fee without hesitation, along with extra for the medicine and for disturbing the doctor so late at night. Back at the ranch, Lillian refused to leave Emma's side. She sat by her daughter's bed all night, sponging her with cool water, trying to get her to drink, praying softly. Zachary stayed too, dozing in a chair in the main room, ready to help if needed. By morning, Emma's fever had come down slightly, but she was still very ill. Lillian looked exhausted, her eyes red from crying and lack of sleep. Zachary made her eat some breakfast and then insisted she rest for a few hours while he watched Emma. "I should be the one taking care of her," Lillian protested weakly. "And you will after you sleep. You are no good to her if you collapse from exhaustion." He gently pushed her toward her bedroom. "I will wake you if anything changes. I promise." She was too tired to argue further. As she lay down, she looked at him with an expression that made his heart ache. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything, for caring, for helping. I do not know what I would do without you." "You are not without me," he said quietly. "I am here and I am not going anywhere." Over the next 3 days, they took turns caring for Emma. Slowly, gradually, the little girl began to improve. Her fever came down, her eyes grew clearer, and she started asking for food. By the end of the week, she was sitting up in bed, playing with her doll and complaining about being bored, which Lillian said was a sure sign she was getting better. The crisis passed, but something between Zachary and Lillian had shifted. They had gone through this together, shared the fear and the relief, and it had brought them closer in a way that casual conversation never could have. One evening, after Emma had fallen asleep, Lillian came out to the porch where Zachary was sitting, watching the stars. She sat down beside him, closer than she had ever sat before. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. "And I do not want you to say anything until I am finished, all right?" He nodded, his heart suddenly beating faster. "When Tom died, I thought my life was over. I thought I would just go through the motions of living for Emma's sake, but that I would never feel anything real again." She took a shaky breath. "These past months here with you, I have started to feel alive again. I wake up in the morning and I am glad to be awake. I see the future and it does not look empty anymore. And that terrifies me because I feel like I am betraying Tom's memory." "You are not betraying anything," Zachary said gently. "Love is not finite. Having room in your heart for the future does not mean you are forgetting the past." "I know that in my head," she said, "but my heart takes longer to catch up." She turned to look at him, and even in the darkness, he could see tears glistening in her eyes. "But my heart is catching up, Zachary, faster than I expected, faster than I think is proper, and I needed you to know that." He reached for her hand, and she let him take it. "I have feelings for you too," he admitted. "Have for a while now, but I did not want to push or presume. You have been through so much." "I have," she agreed. "But maybe it is time to stop just surviving and start living again." Tom would want that for me. He would want Emma to have a father and for me to be happy. Are you saying what I think you are saying? She smiled, a real smile that lit up her whole face. I am saying I would like to see where this goes if you are willing to be patient with me. I am saying I care about you more than I probably should. I am saying I want to try. He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. I am the most patient man you will ever meet. We will go as slow as you need. And Lillian, I care about you too, more than I can put into words. They sat there for a long time, hands clasped, not talking, just being together. And for the first time in a very long time, Zachary felt complete. Winter came to California that year with unusual force, bringing cold rains that turned the roads to mud and made the creek swell beyond its banks. But inside the cottage and the main house, there was warmth and light and laughter. Zachary found himself spending more and more evenings at the cottage, playing games with Emma, talking with Lillian, helping with chores, or just sitting by the fire. Emma, fully recovered from her illness, had decided that Zachary was the best thing that had ever happened to them. She followed him around the ranch like a puppy, asking to help with everything, insisting on sitting next to him at meals, telling him long, rambling stories about her doll's adventures. I am sorry, Lillian said one evening, watching Emma chatter away at Zachary while he patiently listened. She can be a bit much sometimes. She is perfect, Zachary said, and he meant it. He had never given much thought to children before, but Emma had won his heart completely. He loved her energy, her curiosity, the way she saw wonder in everything. As Christmas approached, Zachary made a special trip to town and returned with packages hidden in his saddlebags. On Christmas Eve, he invited Lillian and Emma to the main house for dinner. He had set the table with his mother's good dishes, cooked a roast chicken, and even made an attempt at biscuits that were only slightly burned. After dinner, he brought out the gifts. For Emma, a beautiful new doll with a porcelain face and real hair, along with a set of tiny clothes he had commissioned from the seamstress in town. Emma's shriek of delight could probably be heard in the next county. For Lillian, he had bought a warm wool shawl in deep blue, the color of the evening sky, and a book of poetry he had seen her admiring once in the general store. She opened the packages slowly, tears streaming down her face. Zachary, this is too much, she protested. It is not enough, he said. Not nearly enough for what you have given me. What have I given you? I am just your housekeeper. You have given me a reason to come home at the end of the day. You have given me laughter and conversation and the feeling that this house is finally a home. You have given me hope for the future. That is worth more than any gift I could ever buy. She set the gifts aside and stood up, walking around the table to where he sat. Then, to his surprise and delight, she leaned down and kissed him softly on the lips. It was brief, chaste even, but it sent electricity through his entire body. Mama kissed Zachary, Emma announced gleefully, clapping her hands. Lillian pulled back, blushing furiously. Emma, hush, but Zachary was grinning like a fool. Best Christmas present I have ever received, he said. After that night, their relationship deepened in small but significant ways. They held hands when they walked. They kissed goodnight before Lillian returned to the cottage. They made plans for the ranch, talking about the future as if it were something they would share. But Lillian was still wearing her wedding ring, and Zachary understood what that meant. She was moving forward, but she was not ready to let go of the past entirely. He did not push, just continued to show her through his actions that he was serious about her, about them, about building a life together. Spring came early that year, bringing wildflowers and warm breezes and new calves in the pasture. Emma turned 5 years old, and they celebrated with a cake Lillian baked and a party that was just the three of them but felt perfect anyway. One evening in late April, Lillian asked Zachary to take a walk with her down to the creek. Emma was asleep, and the night was warm and clear, the moon full overhead. They walked in comfortable silence until they reached the water, then Lillian stopped and turned to face him. "I have been doing a lot of thinking," she said. "About Tom, about me, about us." Zachary's heart sank. This sounded like the beginning of a speech that would end with her telling him they had to stop, that she was not ready, that she could never be ready. But then she reached up and took off her wedding ring. "I will always love Tom," she said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "He was my first love, Emma's father, and he gave me so many good memories. But he is gone, and I am still here, and I deserve to be happy. We both deserve to be happy." She took Zachary's hand and pressed the ring into his palm. "I want you to have this, not to wear, obviously, but to keep. Because what Tom and I had, it led me here to you, to this moment. And I think he would approve of what comes next." "What comes next?" Zachary asked, his voice rough with emotion. "I hope what comes next is you asking me a certain question," she said with a small smile. "Because if you do, I am fairly certain of what my answer will be," he laughed, joy flooding through him. "Lillian Bailey, you are stealing my thunder. I had a whole plan. I was going to ask you next month during the summer festival in front of everyone." "I like this better," she said. "Just us and the stars and the creek where Emma and I first came to your land." He dropped to one knee right there in the grass, still holding her wedding ring in one hand while he took her hand in his other. "Lillian Bailey, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life trying to make you and Emma happy? Will you be my wife, my partner, the one I come home to every single night?" "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." He stood and kissed her properly this time, pouring all his love and hope and dreams into that kiss. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, she rested her forehead against his. "I do not have a ring for you yet," he said. "I will get you one, the prettiest one I can find." "I do not need a fancy ring," she said. "Just you. That is all I need." They were married 6 weeks later in the small church in Watsonville, with half the town in attendance. Emma was the flower girl, taking her job very seriously, and the celebration afterward lasted well into the night. But Zachary's favorite moment was not the ceremony or the party, but later, when they returned to the ranch house, now truly their home, and Lillian stood in the bedroom doorway wearing the simple white dress she had sewn herself, looking at him with love and trust and desire in her eyes. "Come here, husband," she said softly, and he went to her, taking her in his arms, knowing he was the luckiest man alive. Their wedding night was tender and sweet, and when Zachary woke the next morning with Lillian curled against his side, her dark hair spread across his pillow, he sent up a silent prayer of thanks. He had saved her once by buying back her ring, but the truth was, she had saved him too. She had saved him from loneliness, from an empty house and an empty heart, from a life half lived. The years that followed were good ones. The ranch prospered, growing from a modest cattle operation to one of the most successful in the region. Lillian proved to have a head for business as well as a gift for making their house a home. She started a small egg and butter business that brought in extra income, and she was always finding ways to improve and expand. Emma grew from a curious 5-year-old into a bright, confident young woman. Zachary officially adopted her on her 7th birthday, giving her his last name and all the rights and responsibilities that came with it. She called him Papa, and there was never any question that he was her father in all the ways that mattered. 2 years after their marriage, Lillian gave birth to a son they named Thomas Zachary, after both his father and his mother's first husband. Tom was a sturdy, happy baby who grew into a boy as fascinated by the ranch as his father. 3 years after Tom came Daniel, quieter and more thoughtful, who preferred books to cattle but loved the land just as much in his own way. And finally, 5 years into their marriage, came their daughter Sarah, a beautiful little girl with her mother's dark hair and her father's blue eyes. The house that had once been too big for one lonely man was now filled with noise and laughter and life. There were muddy boots by the door and toys scattered across the floor, and crayon drawings pinned to the walls. There were bedtime stories and birthday parties and Christmas mornings filled with chaos and joy. Through it all, Zachary and Lillian's love only grew stronger. They had their disagreements, of course, as any couple does, but they worked through them with respect and patience. They supported each other through hard times, celebrated together during good times, and built a partnership based on trust and genuine affection. Lillian never forgot Tom, and Zachary never asked her to. They kept a photograph of him on the mantle, and Emma always had stories about her first father to share with her younger siblings. But there was room in their family for all of it, the past and the present, the sorrow and the joy. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Zachary took Lillian on a trip to San Francisco, their first time away from the ranch since their wedding. They stayed in a fancy hotel, ate at expensive restaurants, and walked along the waterfront holding hands like newlyweds. On their last night, as they stood on their hotel balcony overlooking the city lights, Lillian leaned against him with a contented sigh. "You ever think about that day?" she asked. "When I tried to sell my wedding ring, all the time," he admitted. "I think about how close I came to just riding past, minding my own business. I almost did, you know. I almost decided it was not my problem." "What made you stop?" "Honestly, I do not know. Something in the way you held yourself, maybe, or the look in your eyes. Or maybe it was just fate, destiny, whatever you want to call it. But I am grateful every day that I stopped." "I am grateful too," she said. "You gave me back more than a ring that day. You gave me back my life, my hope, my future. You gave me everything." "We gave each other everything," he corrected. "That is how this works." She turned in his arms and kissed him, and even after 10 years of marriage it still made his heart race. "Take me home," she said. "As lovely as this trip has been, I miss our children and our ranch and our life." They returned to Watsonville to find that the ranch had survived their absence just fine under the management of their foreman, and the children had only caused moderate chaos under the supervision of the neighbor woman they had hired to help. Emma, now 15, had everything under control with the confidence of a young woman used to responsibility. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges. Emma grew up and fell in love with a young man who worked at the bank in town, and they had a wedding at the ranch that was even bigger than Zachary and Lillian's had been. Tom decided he wanted to be a veterinarian and went away to school, but he came back every summer to help on the ranch. Daniel surprised everyone by becoming a teacher, but he built his own small house on the ranch property and taught in the Watsonville school. Sarah was still young, only 13, but already showing signs of inheriting her mother's business sense and her father's love of the land. Through it all, through weddings and births and the occasional loss, through droughts and floods and economic troubles, Zachary and Lillian held fast to each other. They were partners in every sense of the word, building not just a ranch but a legacy, a family that would carry on long after they were gone. On a warm summer evening in 1903, 25 years after that fateful day when a desperate widow had tried to sell her wedding ring for food, Zachary and Lillian sat on their porch watching the sunset. They were both in their 50s now, their hair touched with gray, their faces marked by years of sun and wind and honest work. But their hands were still clasped together, just as they had been on so many other evenings over so many other years. You have any regrets?" Lillian asked him suddenly. "Not a single one," he said without hesitation. Only that I did not meet you sooner," she said. "But then I think about how we met and the path that brought us together, and I realize it all happened exactly as it was meant to. Tom and I had our time, and it was good. You and I have had our time, and it has been extraordinary. I would not change a thing. Not even those first hard months, especially not those," she said. "They taught me how strong I could be. They taught me that hitting bottom is not the end, that there are good people in the world who help for no reason other than kindness. They led me to you." Zachary brought her hand to his lips and kissed it, a gesture he had made thousands of times over their years together. "I love you, Lillian Brennan." "I love you too, Zachary Brennan. Today, tomorrow, always." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple, their grandchildren ran across the yard, their laughter ringing out in the evening air. Emma's children, 3 of them now, were visiting for the summer, and the house was once again filled with the chaos and joy of young ones. Sarah came out onto the porch, carrying glasses of lemonade. "Mama, Papa, Grandma Miller is here to see you. She brought vegetables from her garden." Grandma Miller was actually young Emma, their oldest daughter, but after her first grandchild was born, she had insisted everyone call her Grandma to avoid confusion. She came up onto the porch with a basket of tomatoes and squash, her face glowing with happiness. "I cannot stay long," she said. "John is watching the children, and you know how that usually ends." They all laughed because John, for all his skill with numbers and banking, was hilariously inept at managing his own offspring. But he was a good man, a good husband, and a wonderful father, and that was what mattered. After Emma left, Zachary and Lillian remained on the porch, neither wanting to go inside just yet. The stars were starting to come out, bright pinpoints of light in the darkening sky. "Tell me about our future," Lillian said, a game they sometimes played. "What do you see?" "I see us growing old together," Zachary said. "I see more grandchildren, maybe even great-grandchildren if we live long enough. I see this ranch continuing to thrive, passed down through our children and their children. I see us sitting on this porch when we are 80, still holding hands, still in love." "That sounds perfect," she said. "Absolutely perfect." And it was, not because their life had been easy or without hardship, but because they had faced everything together. Not because they never struggled, but because they never gave up on each other. Not because their love was perfect, but because it was real and deep and enduring. That night, as they lay in bed with the windows open to catch the cool breeze, Lillian said, "You know what I realized today?" "What is that?" Zachary asked, half asleep already. "I have been your wife longer than I was Tom's. For years I measured my life in terms of before and after Tom. But somewhere along the way, without me really noticing, you became my life and he became a cherished memory." "Does that make me a terrible person?" "It makes you human," Zachary said, pulling her closer. "It makes you someone who understands that love is not about forgetting the past, but about embracing the present and the future. Tom gave you Emma and years of happiness. I cannot resent him for that. And I think wherever he is glad you found love again." "I think so too," she whispered. "Thank you, Zachary, for everything, for seeing me that day, for buying back my ring, for giving it back to me, for giving me a chance at a new life. For loving me and Emma and the children we made together, for being the best man I have ever known." "Thank you for saying yes," he replied, "for taking a chance on a cowboy with more hope than sense, for making this house a home, for giving me a family I never thought I would have, for loving me even when I am stubborn and set in my ways, for being you." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, and when morning came, they woke to another day of life on the ranch they had built together. There would be work to do, animals to tend, meals to cook, a business to run. There would be small troubles and occasional worries, but there would also be laughter and love and the knowledge that they had found something rare and precious. The years continued to pass, bringing both joy and sorrow as years always do. They lost friends to old age and illness, saw their children face their own challenges, worried over grandchildren the way they had once worried over their own children. But through it all, they had each other, and that made everything bearable. When Zachary turned 60, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration that lasted 3 days. All their children came, along with their spouses and children. The house overflowed with people, and they had to set up tents in the yard for everyone to sleep in. There was music and dancing and more food than anyone could possibly eat. Tom the Younger, now a respected veterinarian with his own practice, gave a speech about his father that left hardly a dry eye in the crowd. "This man," Tom said, gesturing to Zachary, "he did not have to love me. I was not his son by blood. He could have just been my mother's husband, nothing more. But from the first day he came into my life, he has been my father in every way that matters. He taught me to ride, to work, to be honest, to treat others with respect, to love deeply and without reservation. Everything good in my life I can trace back to the example he set. So today I want to say thank you, Papa. Thank you for choosing us. Thank you for being you." Zachary stood and embraced his son, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Later, as the party continued around them, Lillian found him standing alone by the barn, looking out at the land that had been their life's work. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, slipping her hand into his. "About how different things could have been," he said. "If I had not stopped that day, if Henderson had bought your ring for $2, if you had not had the courage to accept my help, all the little moments that led us here." "Do you believe in fate?" she asked. "I did not used to," he said, "but after everything, how can I not? We were meant to find each other, Lillian, I am sure of it." "So am I," she said. "So am I." As their 60s gave way to their 70s, they began to slow down, as all people do. Zachary turned over more of the ranch operations to Tom, who moved back to the main property with his wife and children. Daniel and Sarah both built their own homes on the ranch land, keeping the family close. Emma and her family remained in town, but they visited every Sunday for dinner, a tradition that Lillian insisted on maintaining no matter what. On their 40th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party at the church in Watsonville, the same church where they had married 4 decades earlier. The whole town turned out because Zachary and Lillian were beloved figures in the community, known for their kindness and generosity. When it came time for Zachary to make a speech, he looked out at the crowd, at his children and grandchildren, at the friends they had made over the years, at the life they had built, and he felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "40 years ago," he said, his voice still strong despite his age, "I did the smartest thing I have ever done. I stopped to help a woman in need. That simple act of kindness changed my entire life. It brought me love and family and more happiness than I ever thought possible. So I guess the lesson here is that you never know when one small decision will change everything. Be kind. Pay attention. Help where you can. You never know what blessings might come from it." Lillian stood beside him, her hair now completely white, her face lined with age but still beautiful to him. "And I learned," she added, "that hitting rock bottom is not the end of your story, that accepting help is not weakness but wisdom, that it is possible to love deeply more than once in a lifetime, that family is not just blood but also choice, and that the best things in life often come from the moments we least expect. They raised their glasses in a toast, and everyone drank to love, to family, to 40 years of marriage and counting. That night, lying in bed in the house they had shared for so long, Lillian said, "Do you think we will get another 40 years?" Zachary laughed. "I would be 115. That seems unlikely. But if we could, would you want to? Every moment with you is a gift," he said seriously. "So yes, I would take another 40 years, another 100 years, another 1,000 years if they were with you. You always know the right thing to say," she said, kissing him softly. "That is because you make it easy to tell the truth." They did not get another 40 years, but they got something just as precious. They got more time, enough time to see great-grandchildren born, enough time to celebrate their 45th, and then their 50th anniversary. They got to see their ranch continue to thrive under the care of the next generation. They got to sit on their porch on warm evenings and watch the sun set over land they had worked and loved for half a century. When Zachary was 78 and Lillian was 76, he took ill with pneumonia during a particularly harsh winter. The doctor said it was serious, that at his age, recovery was not guaranteed. Lillian refused to leave his side, sleeping in a chair next to his bed, holding his hand, talking to him even when he was too weak to respond. Their children gathered, preparing for the worst, but Zachary was not ready to leave yet. He had too much to live for, too much love still to give. He fought his way back from the edge, day by painful day, until finally the fever broke and he was able to sit up and eat again. "You scared me," Lillian said when he was finally recovering. "I thought I was going to lose you." "Not yet," he said, his voice still weak but determined. "We still have that 80th anniversary to celebrate, remember? That is only 2 more years. Then I guess I better stick around." And he did. He recovered slowly but surely, and by spring he was back on his feet, though moving more carefully than before. They celebrated their 52nd anniversary quietly, just the two of them and their children, and it was perfect. 2 years later, on the morning of their 54th anniversary, Zachary woke to find Lillian had made his favorite breakfast and set the table with the good china. She looked beautiful in a new dress that Sarah had made for her, and she was wearing the ring he had bought her all those years ago, the one he had saved for months to afford. "Where is your other ring?" he asked, noticing for the first time in years that she was not wearing Tom's wedding band. "I gave it to Emma last week," she said. "It seemed right. It was her father's ring, and she wanted to give it to her own daughter when she gets married next year. I have been wearing it for 54 years, Zachary. I think it is time to let it go to the next generation. Are you sure?" "I am sure," she said. "I will always carry Tom in my heart, but I do not need a ring to remember him by, and I have you, which is more than enough." They spent the day together, just the two of them, walking slowly around the ranch, visiting all their favorite spots. The creek where he had proposed, the cottage where she and Emma had first lived, the barn where Tom had learned to care for animals, the porch where they had spent countless evenings watching the sunset. As the sun went down on their 54th anniversary, they sat on that porch one more time, their old hands clasped together, their lives so intertwined that neither could imagine existing without the other. "I love you," Zachary said. "More today than yesterday, less than tomorrow." "I love you too," Lillian replied. "Thank you for 54 beautiful years. Thank you for saying yes to a cowboy with a crazy idea about buying back a wedding ring." She laughed, the sound still bright and joyful despite her years. "Best decision I ever made." Zachary lived to be 83 years old, passing peacefully in his sleep on a warm summer night with Lillian beside him. She held his hand as he drew his last breath, and though her heart shattered all over again, She knew with absolute certainty that their love would endure beyond death. At his funeral, the church was packed with family and friends, with people whose lives he had touched in ways large and small. Tom gave a eulogy that celebrated his father's life, his kindness, his integrity, his love for family and land. Emmer read a poem about love that never dies. Daniel spoke about lessons learned. Sarah simply said, "He was the best father anyone could ask for, and we will miss him every single day." Lillian stood at the graveside after everyone else had left, looking down at the fresh earth. "You promised me we would celebrate our 80th anniversary," she said softly. "I am going to hold you to that promise, Zachary Brennan. Wait for me, you hear, because I am not done with you yet, not by a long shot." She lived for another 7 years, surrounded by family, staying in the house she and Zachary had built together. She saw more great-grandchildren born, saw the ranch continue to prosper, saw her children and grandchildren living good lives. But everyone could see that she was just marking time, waiting. On a spring morning in 1936. Lillian Bailey Brennan passed away quietly, sitting in her favorite chair on the porch, looking out at the land she had loved for almost 60 years. She was 90 years old, and she died with a smile on her face, as if she had seen something wonderful. They buried her next to Zachary, and on her headstone they wrote the words she had requested. She was loved deeply twice, and she loved deeply in return. Now she has gone home. The ranch continued on, passed down through the generations, each one adding their own chapter to the story, while honoring the foundation that Zachary and Lillian had built. And sometimes, on warm summer evenings when the sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, people said you could see two figures sitting on the old porch, holding hands, watching over the land and the family they had created. Whether it was true or just a romantic story, no one knew for certain. But what was certain was this: a desperate widow had once tried to sell her wedding ring for food. A cowboy had bought it and given it right back, and from that single act of kindness, an entire legacy had been born. Love had triumphed over loss, hope over despair, and two lonely souls had found in each other something worth living for. And in the end, that was the only story that really mattered.